To watch all the same fishing shows you watch around this time of year because you've got the itch to go fishing. And they're on bass boats, they're in power boats, they're doing this, you hardly ever see them in a canoe. And you gotta think, for thousands of years, this was the real deal, right? Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors on the Cheap, and I just finished renovating this old smashed up canoe that I got for like $110. I got off some guy in Kijiji. It was smashed up, it was basically useless, and to look at the pictures of it made it look pretty bad. But I could see that a little bit of fiberglass, a little bit of paint, a little bit of time, a little bit of love, I'd have this lovely, lovely vessel just ready to go, ready to cut through the water once again with me and my young fella. But what I thought I'd talk about in this video is, because this is Outdoors on the Cheap, just thinking about the canoe and how much more versatile this is than most of what you see on fishing shows. I don't have cable anymore, but when I did, I used to watch all the same fishing shows you watch around this time of year because you've got the itch to go fishing. And they're on bass boats, they're on power boats, they're doing this, you hardly ever see them in a canoe. And you got to think, for thousands of years, this was the real deal, right? The indigenous people in Canada, where I live anyway, in North America, wherever there was birch bark, or even south of here where they make dugout canoes and stuff like that, the canoe was the means of conveyance, right? No one had ATVs, no one had SUVs with trailer hitches and trailers and bass boats and all this other stuff. Sure, that stuff's all fun, but you don't need any of that to get out on the water. I mean, the most simple thing is to just use your feet, right? And if that's all you got, if you don't have a car, then that's how you do it. And there's plenty of options. Most of the fishing I do just with a pair of hip waders. That's it, right? Sometimes not even that if I'm going to be covering a lot of ground. But if you want to go that next step, and you want to get out on the water, get on lakes, or go down large rivers, or go way, let's say there's a road that goes by a river, but that river goes on for miles inland where you can't get to it. I mean, those remote places, especially if you like fishing for trout like I do, those are the places you get the good fishing usually, because there isn't a whole bunch of guys there fishing off the back of their ATV, right? So the canoe is the way to go, in my opinion. Because it's just, you don't need any, you just need a couple paddles. So you should always have a spare paddle in your canoe if you're by yourself. But it's the cheapest outfit for a boat on the water, right? And sure, you have to learn how to use a canoe, and there's, but if you're a reasonably clever person, most of the stuff you just learn through trial and error, right? I remember there was a kids camp I worked at one summer, and the lifeguard and I, whenever there was a really bad storm, like really wind, it was on a really big lake, we'd take these aluminum canoes out on the lake. We'd take one each just to paddle in huge winds and huge waves. Just, it was warm and it was a summer, so it didn't matter if the canoe flipped. We had a life jacket on. We practiced getting out of a canoe, getting back into a canoe by yourself. We practiced unswamping a swamp canoe in the water by us. No one was teaching us the stuff. We were just messing around, two of us, right? And taking a canoe out in big water, trying not to get it swamped. It was a great learning experience. Probably not advisable in terms of danger, but back in those days, you had a lot more freedom to put yourself in danger, I suppose. It all worked out great. We learned a lot about canoes that summer, just through trial and error, and in a relatively safe setting, trying things out, right? But yeah, the canoe is so versatile compared to other things. And think about, as long as you have a vehicle you can get it on, whether you've got a car with roof racks, a minivan, really you could put the back seats down and just, if the canoe's short enough, just slide it in the back, have some of it hanging out the back, and just tie the door down. For that matter, you could do the same thing with an SUV. You don't always have to have things up on the roof racks, and it can be a lot easier to just slide it in and slide it out. I have a 12-foot Sports Pal canoe out back behind the house. That's an aluminum canoe. They weigh about 45 pounds. I can pick the whole thing up and hold it over my head with one hand. A number of years ago, I had a Hyundai Accent, probably one of the cheapest cars in the world. And it was a hatchback. And I used to pop the hatch up and put the canoe in the car. Put the back seats down, and the bow of the canoe would be just about a foot behind the gear shift on it, right? So about half the canoe would be hanging out the back of the car, and I'd have the hatchback sort of tied down with bungee cords and stuff like that. Because I didn't think that I was worried about the roof of the car bending under the weight of the wind and stuff like that. But I used to throw that thing in the car and just go for it, right? And it was fine. I mean, you wouldn't want to go, drive for hours with it like that. But, if you're just zipping down the road, half an hour sort of thing, worked totally fine. The main thing was that when you put it back in the car after canoeing, you either had to dry it off or lay a tarp down to, to some extent protect the upholstery. For me, I tend to beat the hell out of my cars anyway. To me, a car is just a small truck that doesn't know it's a truck. So I'm often be in the favor of buying cheap cars and treating them badly. Cars are worth so little. Once they're about 7 years old, they're we're worth a fraction of what you bought them for anyway. So I tend to just use my cars. I put everything you can imagine in my cars. But yeah, think about that. The idea of, as opposed to, think of the cost of getting a vehicle that'll take a trailer hitch, installing a trailer hitch on the vehicle, getting a trailer, getting a boat, getting a motor, right? Where I live, getting a license to operate a boat with a motor. You don't have to do that with a canoe. You shouldn't, if you don't know, if you've never been in a canoe before, the first time you go on a canoe, you should go out with someone who knows what they're doing and ask them a lot of questions and watch a lot of videos on it too, okay? Because you can save yourself a lot of grief. Just learning some basic strokes with the paddle and just how to handle yourself in a canoe. You can tell if you're an experienced canoeer and you're in a canoe with someone who is not experienced, you can tell they are just not balanced. They don't, they just don't know how to sort of situate themselves in the canoe. They don't understand that everything in canoe is about being as low as you can be, as close to the center as you can be, all the time. If you got to reach over the side of the canoe, you don't lean over and reach down. You put your head down and reach your arm down and feel for things. There's a lot of, and if the weather's really high and you're by yourself on a canoe, you don't sit up in the seat. You kneel down and get low, right? So that you're lowering the profile of the canoe. Canoe is very hard to flip if you're kneeling on the floor. If you're up in the seat, it makes it a lot easier. And of course, I guess I should mention, in terms of design, there's a whole range of designs of canoe out there. As I mentioned in another video, the fiberglass canoes, the old fiberglass canoes, you can tend to get those the cheapest because people don't want them. People like the newer sort of plastic or PVC type ones. They like aluminum because it's light, very light, right? Very easy to pick up. These fiberglass ones tend to weigh more. Now that can be good when you're on the big water sort of thing. There's a lot of wind and stuff. But yeah, you can tend to, especially, and these fiberglass ones tend to be older, so they tend to be beat up and stuff like that. But, a little bit of fiberglass repairs, some kitty hair, a lick of paint here and there, and you can have them working just like new. But when you're choosing a canoe to buy, give it some thought about, what's the intended use. Some canoes glide really nicely through the water. They move effortlessly. The slightest bit of, paddling will get the thing going. But those canoes tend to be tippy. Not always, but they tend to be more unstable, right? So with a canoe, you're usually making the choice between stability and sort of smoothness, speed, efficiency in terms of its ability to cut through the water. I found this sort of design here is a good, happy medium. It's got a little bit of a keel. It's kind of wide in the middle, but tapers nicely. It's got a nice, whatever that term is, but from front to back, it goes up a little bit in both ways. I find these tend to be pleasant to paddle, pleasant to use. A good balance. This here type design almost looks like a dory, right? A good balance between the, hydrodynamics and stability. My Sports Pal canoe, which you got out back, is a short, stubby little canoe. It's very stable, very hard to flip, but it really just sort of, it doesn't glide through the water. It pushes through the water like a little tank sort of thing. It's not built for that. That's a tough little canoe built for taking down rivers by yourself and easy to pick up, 45 pounds, you know, just a different mentality in terms of canoes. But if you've got a lot of ground to cover, you want to go a lot of distance and you want your paddling to be easy, you know, you want to get the most motion for each stroke as possible. You want to get something that's sort of, you know, relatively narrow. It's got a nice taper in the front and that sort of thing. This design of canoe, I think this was called Marvac, the original design of this. But there's a lot of canoes. I think, you know, a lot of the older canoes you find, they all have this exact same design because it's just such a good design, right? Cuts through the water well, gives you good stability. As long as you're not doing something ridiculous like kneeling on the side and reaching down into the water to retrieve the fish. You got to have your head about you, right? But yeah, just thought I'd give you, you know, some thoughts on that. Just some, you know, I was making another video and all this stuff was going through my head, so I thought I'd share that with you. If you're, you know, if you haven't got a lot of money for whatever reason, you're a young guy just starting out in the world, or just things haven't gone your way, right? That happens. You can put some money into a canoe. And, you know, I got this one for $110, cost me about $100 worth of materials and you know, some hours of my time to fix it up sort of thing. But now it's ready to go. So, you know, to me, that's a better expense, and it really, I mean, there's no reason to think this canoe, if I take care of it, it should last me the rest of my functional life. These things tend to last a long time if you take care of them. So it is an investment in that sense, right? It's not going to lose its value unless you really treat it bad. These things are built to be outdoors and they're built to last as long as you take care of them. I mean, this thing must be 40 years old, I'd say at least. And, you know, a little bit of fiberglass, a lick of paint, and it's basically like new. I can't wait to get it out in the water. So something to think about when you're watching the fishing shows and you see those guys on their bass boats with their ATVs and all this other gear. You don't need any of that. I mean, the most important thing is you've got your feet and you've got your mobility. But if you want to be out in the water in a boat, the canoe is the way to go. A kayak's good too, but it's, you know, I think a canoe is more versatile than a kayak personally. I know there's going to be people that disagree with that. Where I am, if you're going up rivers and stuff like that, you're often having to get in and out and in and out. That can be a pain with sort of standard kayak. I guess if you had one of those kayaks, a sit-on-top kayak, it'd be a bit better. But there's a lot to be said for the canoe. You can throw a backpack in it. You can throw your gear in it. Two people could sit in it. Even three people could sit in it in a pinch, right? You could go hunting and throw a deer in it. You know, like it's just more. If you're going to have just one thing, right? I'm speaking. This is outdoors on the cheap, so you don't have a fleet, right? If you're going to have just one thing, I would go with the canoe. This one I think is almost 16 feet, 14, 15, 16 feet, something like that. I mean, if you're going to be alone all the time and you're not taking anybody with you, 12 feet's all you need for a canoe. But I got kids and that's why I have a 12-footer, which I bought when I didn't have kids. Still works, still a great canoe. And if I'm going off by myself, I'm taking that one because it's just easier, it weighs nothing. But if I'm taking my kids, I'm taking this thing, right? Or if I was going on a major trip with a lot of gear, because this has the real estate to put all that gear in, right? This is the real deal. So yeah, just some musings on the value of owning a canoe. If you had to choose one boat, I think the canoe is the way to go for freshwater fishing. Anyway, at least where I live. So I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. And until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.